3 bullies thought they could humiliate the quiet new girl at graduation by ripping her uniform in front of everyone. They had no idea she was hiding a black belt that would leave them crying on the floor. What happened next changed everything. At Roosevelt High School forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Chun had been the invisible girl at Roosevelt High School for exactly 4 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. Not that she was counting, but when you're the new kid who transferred in during senior year, every day feels like an eternity when you're trying to blend into the background. At 17, Maya stood barely 5 feet tall, with long black hair that she kept in a simple ponytail and dark-rimmed glasses that made her look even younger than she was. She preferred oversized hoodies and jeans that hung loose on her small frame, clothing choices that helped her disappear into the crowd of 2,400 students that filled the hallways of Roosevelt High each morning. What none of her classmates knew was that beneath those baggy clothes was the compact, muscled body of a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo. Maya had been training since she was 6 years old, following in the footsteps of her grandmother, who had been a competitive martial artist in South Korea before immigrating to America in the 1970s. Her grandmother, who everyone called Homoni, had insisted that Maya learn not just the physical aspects of martial arts, but the mental discipline that came with it. A true warrior, Homoni would say during their training sessions in the converted garage behind their house, knows when to fight and when to walk away. The strongest person in the room is often the one who chooses peace. Maya had internalized this philosophy so deeply that even when she faced the daily challenges of being the new girl at Roosevelt High, she chose to absorb the small slights and casual cruelties rather than respond with force. She believed that keeping her head down and staying invisible was the path of least resistance. The Ken family had moved to Riverside, California, from Portland, Oregon, when Maya's father got a job transfer that he couldn't refuse. The timing couldn't have been worse. Starting senior year at a new school meant that all the friend groups had been established years ago. All the social hierarchies were set in stone, and there was no natural place for an outsider to fit in. Roosevelt High School was a sprawling campus that served one of the more affluent districts in Riverside County. The school prided itself on its academic achievements, its championship sports teams, and its impressive college placement rates. But like many competitive high schools, it also had an undercurrent of social pressure and hierarchy that could be brutal for those who didn't fit the mold. Maya had tried to find her place in the first few weeks. She'd attended a meeting of the academic decathlon team, but the other students seemed to communicate in a shorthand developed over years of shared experiences. She'd considered trying out for the tennis team, but the coach made it clear that senior year was not the time to be developing new talent. Eventually, she found refuge in the school library, where she spent her lunch periods reading at a corner table near the poetry section. The librarian, Mrs. Rodriguez, was kind to her, and Maya appreciated having a quiet space where she could disappear for 30 minutes each day. It was during one of these library sessions that Maya first caught the attention of the 3 students who would make her final months at Roosevelt High increasingly difficult. Chloe Whitman was what people called California pretty, tall, blonde, with the kind of effortless tan that came from years of beach weekends and country club swimming pools. She was the captain of the cheerleading squad, homecoming queen, and had been accepted early admission to USC. Chloe had the confidence that came with never having to wonder if she belonged anywhere. Her best friend, Madison Brooks, was cut from the same cloth, wealthy, popular, and used to getting her way. Madison was slightly shorter than Chloe, with auburn hair and green eyes that could look warm and inviting when she wanted something, or cold and calculating when she didn't. She was headed to Stanford in the fall and never let anyone forget it. The third member of their group was Ashley Martinez, who had earned her place in the popular crowd by being completely willing to do whatever Chloe and Madison wanted. Ashley was the daughter of a local real estate developer, and she'd learned early that loyalty to the right people could open doors that talent alone might not. The three girls had been friends since elementary school, and they moved to Roosevelt High like royalty, with their perfectly styled hair, designer clothes, and an entourage of admirers who hung on their every word. They sat at the prime table in the cafeteria, threw the most exclusive parties, and had the kind of social media following that made them minor celebrities in their own right. Maya first appeared on their radar on a Tuesday afternoon in February, when she was sitting at her usual table in the library, reading a collection of Maya Angelou poems. She was so absorbed in the book that she didn't notice Chloe, Madison, and Ashley approaching until they were standing right next to her table. "Excuse me," Chloe said, her voice carrying that particular tone of false politeness that meant trouble. "You're in our spot." Maya looked up confused. She'd been sitting at the same table for weeks, and she'd never seen these girls in the library before. "I'm sorry, I didn't know this was reserved for anyone." Madison laughed, a sound that was meant to be tinkling and pretty, but came across as sharp. "It's not officially reserved, but we've been using this table since freshman year. It's kind of a tradition." Ashley nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, we always sit here when we come to the library. It's like our special place." Maya could feel the eyes of other students turning toward their table. She hated being the center of attention, and she could sense that this was some kind of test. She also noticed that despite claiming this was their traditional spot, none of the three girls had any books or school supplies with them. "Of course," Maya said quietly, closing her book and gathering her things. "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding." As she stood to leave, she heard Madison whisper to Chloe, just loud enough for Maya to hear, "She's so weird. Who sits alone in the library reading poetry?" "Probably some loser who can't make friends," Ashley added. And all three girls giggled. Maya felt her face burn with embarrassment, but she kept walking toward the exit. Behind her, she heard Chloe say in a voice that was clearly meant to carry, "Well, at least now we know where to find some peace and quiet. I doubt she'd be back." But Maya did come back, the next day and every day after that. She chose a different table, farther from the poetry section, but she refused to let them drive her away from the one place at Roosevelt High where she felt comfortable. Over the following weeks, Maya began to notice the three girls more often. They seemed to appear wherever she was: in the hallway between classes, in the bathroom during lunch, in the parking lot after school. At first, she thought it was just a coincidence. Roosevelt High was a big school, but certain areas were natural gathering places, but the encounters began to feel increasingly deliberate. Chloe would walk past Maya's locker and make comments about her clothes being so Portland, or trying too hard to be different. Madison would bump into her in the hallway and then apologize with exaggerated concern, as if Maya were fragile and needed protection. Ashley would laugh loudly at jokes that seemed to be aimed in Maya's direction, even when she couldn't hear what was being said. The worst part was that none of it was quite serious enough to report. Maya had been bullied before at her middle school in Portland, and she knew the difference between casual social cruelty and genuine harassment. This felt like something in between a systematic campaign to make her feel unwelcome, but executed with enough subtlety that any adult would dismiss it as typical teenage drama. Maya's parents noticed that she seemed unhappy, but when they asked about school, she gave them the standard teenager response, "It's fine." Her mother, Linda, had her own struggles adjusting to a new city and a new job, and her father, David, was working long hours trying to prove himself in his new position. Maya didn't want to add to their stress by complaining about something as trivial as Mean Girls. Besides, she told herself, she only had a few more months to get through. After graduation, she would be heading to UC Berkeley, where she planned to study engineering. She could survive anything for a few more months. What Maya didn't realize was that Chloe, Madison, and Ashley were just getting started. They had identified her as an easy target, someone who wouldn't fight back, wouldn't tell on them, and wouldn't defend herself. In their minds, Maya represented everything they disliked about people who didn't belong in their world. She was quiet when they were loud, serious when they were carefree, and indifferent to the social status that meant everything to them. As winter turned to spring, their attention to Maya intensified. They began sitting near her in the classes they shared, whispering comments that were just quiet enough that the teacher couldn't hear but loud enough to make Maya's cheeks burn. They would walk behind her in the hallways, mimicking her posture and the way she walked. They started taking pictures of her when she wasn't looking, posting them on social media with captions that were cruel, but not quite cruel enough to get them in trouble. Maya tried to ignore it all. She focused on her studies, maintained her perfect GPA, and counted down the days until graduation. She had learned long ago that bullies got bored when their victims didn't react, and she was determined not to give them the satisfaction of knowing they were getting to her. But as graduation approached, something shifted in the dynamic. The three girls seemed to sense that their time was running out, that their opportunity to make a lasting impression on Maya was slipping away. They had spent months testing her boundaries, seeing how much she would take before she broke. Maya had no idea that they were planning something special for graduation day. Something that would push her far beyond her breaking point and reveal the warrior that she had been hiding beneath her quiet exterior. As she sat in her bedroom the night before graduation, carefully pressing her cap and gown and laying out the simple white dress she planned to wear underneath, Maya allowed herself to feel hopeful. Tomorrow would mark the end of her time at Roosevelt High and the beginning of her real life. She had no way of knowing that tomorrow would also be the day when her carefully maintained invisibility would be shattered forever, when the discipline and restraint she had practiced for months would finally reach its limit, and when three bullies would learn that the quiet new girl they had been tormenting was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The systematic campaign against Maya began in earnest during the second week of March, when spring break was still a month away and graduation felt like a distant dream. What had started as casual encounters in the library evolved into something more calculated and deliberate. It was during a P. English literature that Maya first noticed how coordinated their efforts had become. Mrs. Patterson had assigned group projects analyzing themes in contemporary American novels, and students were allowed to choose their own partners. Maya had been hoping to work alone, as she often did, but Mrs. Patterson insisted that everyone needed to collaborate. As Maya looked around the classroom, trying to identify someone who might be willing to partner with her, she heard Chloe's voice ring out across the room. "Maya, you should totally work with us. We need someone smart for our group." Maya felt a flutter of surprise. In all their previous interactions, the three girls had made it clear that they considered her beneath their notice. Perhaps she had misjudged them. Perhaps this was an opportunity to finally break through the social barriers that had kept her isolated. "That would be great," Maya replied, gathering her books and moving toward their cluster of desks near the window. Madison smiled at her with what seemed like genuine warmth. "Perfect. We're doing The Great Gatsby, and we heard you're like super academic. We could really use your help with the analysis part." Ashley nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, and we can handle all the presentation stuff. We're really good at public speaking." As they began planning their project, Maya felt a cautious optimism. Maybe she had been too quick to judge these girls. Maybe their previous behavior had been thoughtless rather than malicious. Maybe this was the beginning of the social connection she had been hoping to find at Roosevelt High. Over the next week, they met several times to work on the project. Maya did most of the research and writing, while Chloe, Madison, and Ashley focused on creating the visual presentation. Maya noticed that they often seemed more interested in talking about weekend plans and spring break trips than discussing Fitzgerald's commentary on the American dream. But she attributed this to different learning styles. It wasn't until the day of their presentation that Maya realized she had been played. Standing in front of the class, Maya began presenting the analysis she had carefully researched and written. She had prepared detailed notes about the symbolism of the green light, the significance of the Valley of Ashes, and the critique of wealth and social status that ran throughout the novel. But when it came time for Chloe to present her section, something went wrong. Instead of discussing the character development they had agreed upon, Chloe began talking about themes that directly contradicted Maya's analysis. "Actually," Chloe said, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the classroom, "I think Maya might have misunderstood some of the basic plot points. Like, the green light isn't really about hope and dreams. It's just, a light." Madison picked up the thread seamlessly. "Yeah, and I don't think Fitzgerald was trying to criticize wealthy people. I mean, he was wealthy himself, right? Why would he criticize his own lifestyle?" Ashley giggled. "Maybe some people just don't understand what it's like to have money, so they think it's automatically bad." Maya stood frozen at the front of the classroom, her carefully prepared notes suddenly feeling useless in her hands. She could see Mrs. Patterson frowning, clearly confused by the disconnect between different parts of their presentation. Other students were looking back and forth between Maya and the three girls, sensing drama but not understanding its source. "Actually," Maya said quietly, "we discussed this in our planning meetings. The green light is widely interpreted by scholars as representing Gatsby's yearning for an idealized past and an impossible future." Chloe shrugged, as if Maya's correction was simply one opinion among many. "I guess we'll have to agree to disagree. That's what's great about literature, right? Everyone can have their own interpretation." The presentation continued for another 10 minutes, with Maya growing increasingly uncomfortable as her research was dismissed or contradicted at every turn. By the time they returned to their seats, she felt humiliated and confused. After class, as Maya was packing up her books, she overheard Madison whispering to Ashley, "Did you see her face when we started disagreeing with her? She looked like she was going to cry." "I almost felt bad for her," Ashley whispered back. "But she's so arrogant, acting like she knows everything just because she reads a lot." Maya realized in that moment that the entire collaboration had been a setup. They had deliberately sabotaged their own project just to embarrass her in front of the class. It was a level of calculated cruelty that took her breath away. From that point forward, the pattern of harassment became more sophisticated and more frequent. Maya began to notice that whenever she answered a question in class, one of the three girls would cough or sneeze loudly, disrupting her response. When she walked down the hallway, they would fall into step behind her, imitating her gait and whispering just loudly enough for her to hear fragments of their conversation. "Look at how she walks, like she's afraid of everything. Those clothes are so weird. Does she shop at thrift stores? My mom says some families just don't know how to fit into nice communities." The psychological impact was more devastating than any physical aggression could have been. Maya found herself second-guessing every choice she made, from what she wore to how she walked to whether she should speak up in class. She started taking longer routes between classes to avoid them, eating lunch in different locations each day, and timing her arrival and departure to minimize contact. But no matter what she did, they seemed to anticipate her moves. If she used the bathroom on the second floor, they would appear there. If she tried to study in the courtyard, they would find reasons to walk past her table. If she stayed after school to work in the computer lab, they would show up with legitimate-sounding reasons to be there too. The stress began affecting her performance in other areas. Maya had always been a perfectionist when it came to her academics, but she found herself making careless mistakes on assignments, losing focus during lectures, and struggling to maintain the concentration that had always been her strength. Her parents noticed the change in her behavior. She became withdrawn at home, spending most of her time in her room and giving short answers when they asked about her day. Her appetite decreased, and she often seemed tired despite getting adequate sleep. "Is everything okay at school?" her mother asked one evening over dinner. "You seem stressed." Maya pushed food around on her plate, not making eye contact. "It's just senior year stuff. Everyone's anxious about graduation and college." Her father looked concerned. "If someone is bothering you, we can talk to the school administration. You don't have to handle everything on your own." "It's not that serious," Maya replied quickly. "Just typical high school drama. I can handle it." But privately, Maya was beginning to doubt her ability to handle anything. The constant vigilance required to avoid confrontation was exhausting. She found herself checking over her shoulder in hallways, scanning rooms before entering them, and planning escape routes in case she needed to leave quickly. The three girls had perfected the art of plausible deniability. If a teacher or administrator had witnessed any of their individual actions, each incident would have seemed innocent or accidental. It was only in aggregate, seen as a pattern over weeks and months, that their behavior revealed itself as systematic harassment. Maya began to understand why so many victims of bullying felt helpless. It wasn't just about the individual incidents. It was about the way constant targeting eroded your confidence, made you doubt your own perceptions, and left you feeling isolated and vulnerable. During her martial arts training at home, Maya found herself struggling to maintain the mental discipline that had always been her foundation. Her grandmother noticed that her movements were tense, her breathing shallow, and her focus scattered. "Your mind is clouded," Harmony observed after a particularly difficult training session in their garage. "Something is disturbing your peace." Maya sat on the mat, still breathing hard from their sparring practice. She wanted to tell her grandmother everything, but she also didn't want to admit that she was letting a few mean girls get under her skin. "It's nothing serious," Maya said. "Just some girls at school who don't like me very much." Harmony studied her granddaughter's face with the intensity of someone who had spent decades reading people's intentions and emotions. "The way they treat you is affecting your spirit. I can see it in your movements, in your breathing, in your eyes." "They haven't actually done anything to me," Maya protested. "They just make me feel unwelcome." "Making someone feel unwelcome is doing something to them," Harmony said firmly. "Emotional violence is still violence. The question is what you plan to do about it." Maya looked down at her hands, which bore calluses from years of training. "You always taught me that violence should be the last resort. That a true warrior seeks peace." "Yes," Harmony agreed. "But I also taught you that peace cannot exist without justice. Sometimes seeking peace means refusing to accept injustice. Sometimes seeking peace means standing up for yourself." As April arrived and graduation grew closer, Maya hoped that the harassment might decrease as everyone became focused on final exams and college preparations. Instead, it intensified. The three girls seemed to sense that their window of opportunity was closing, and they began pushing boundaries in ways they hadn't before. They started following her on social media, creating fake accounts to send her anonymous messages filled with subtle threats and insults. They would take pictures of her from across the cafeteria or during class, posting them with captions that mocked her appearance or behavior. They began spreading rumors about her family, suggesting that they were poor, that they didn't belong in Riverside, that Maya was only at Roosevelt High because of some kind of charity program. The psychological pressure was building toward a breaking point, though Maya didn't recognize it at the time. She had spent so many months absorbing their harassment, turning the other cheek, trying to maintain her dignity through silence, that she had lost touch with her own limits. What Maya didn't know was that Chloe, Madison, and Ashley were planning something special for graduation day. They had spent weeks discussing how to make their final statement, How to ensure that Maya's last memory of Roosevelt High School would be one of complete humiliation. They had decided that embarrassing her in a classroom or hallway wasn't enough. They wanted an audience. They wanted witnesses. They wanted to destroy her dignity in front of everyone who mattered: parents, teachers, fellow students, and the community members who would be attending the graduation ceremony. As Maya continued through her final weeks at Roosevelt High, focusing on her studies and trying to maintain her invisibility, she had no idea that her tormentors were crafting a plan that would push her far beyond anything she had experienced before. The quiet, disciplined girl who had spent months absorbing abuse was about to discover that even the most patient person has a breaking point, and that sometimes the price of peace is simply too high to pay. May arrived at Roosevelt High School with the kind of suffocating heat that made everyone irritable and restless. The campus buzzed with the nervous energy of impending graduation, college preparations, and the thousand small dramas that erupted when teenagers realized their high school lives were coming to an end. For Maya, the intensifying heat felt like a physical manifestation of the pressure that had been building inside her for months. Senior Activities Week had begun, and everywhere she looked, there were reminders that she was still an outsider looking in at a community she had never truly joined. The week started with Senior Awards Night, held in the school auditorium. Maya sat in the back row with a handful of other students who weren't expecting to receive recognition, watching as Chloe, Madison, and Ashley collected accolades for their various achievements. Chloe won the Spirit Award for her enthusiasm and school involvement. Madison received recognition for her academic excellence and early admission to Stanford. Ashley was honored for her community service work with her father's real estate company's charity foundation. As each girl walked across the stage to thunderous applause, Maya couldn't help but notice how effortlessly they commanded attention and admiration. They belonged here in a way that she never would, and they knew it. During the reception afterward, Maya tried to slip out quietly, but found herself blocked near the exit by a cluster of parents and faculty members. She was trapped in the crowd when she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "That Chinese girl over there," she heard someone say, though she couldn't identify the speaker. "The one who transferred in senior year. I heard she's been causing problems for some of our students." "Really?" another voice responded. "She seems so quiet." "Oh, you know how it is," the first voice continued. "These academic types can be very competitive, very aggressive about grades and class rank. Some of the girls have mentioned that she makes them uncomfortable." Maya felt her face burning as she realized they were talking about her. She was Korean American, not Chinese, but the distinction clearly didn't matter to whoever was spreading these lies. More importantly, she had never been aggressive about anything, least of all academics. She had deliberately kept a low profile, never competing for class rank or calling attention to her achievements. She managed to push through the crowd and escape to her car, but the conversation echoed in her mind for the rest of the evening. Someone had been spreading stories about her, painting her as the aggressor in conflicts she had never initiated. The calculated nature of this character assassination felt more sophisticated than anything the three girls had done before. The next day brought Senior Prank Day, traditionally a light-hearted celebration where graduating students played harmless jokes around campus. Maya had no intention of participating, but she found herself caught up in the chaos anyway. She was retrieving books from her locker when she noticed something was wrong. The lock had been tampered with, and when she opened the metal door, the contents of her locker had been rearranged. Her textbooks were stacked in a different order, her personal items had been moved, and there was a small note tucked into one of her notebooks. The note was written in handwriting she didn't recognize. Some people don't know when they're not wanted. Maybe it's time to get the hint. Maya looked around the hallway, but saw only the usual chaos of students celebrating their final weeks. No one seemed to be paying attention to her, but she had the unsettling feeling that she was being watched. Later that morning, during a P-calculus, Maya discovered that someone had accessed her online assignment portal and changed several of her completed homework submissions. The modifications were subtle but significant, just enough to make her answers incorrect and damage her perfect grade point average. When she approached Mr. Henderson after class to explain what had happened, he looked skeptical. "Maya, these assignments show your login credentials and timestamp from last night," he said, pulling up the digital records on his computer. "According to the system, you made these changes yourself." "I would never sabotage my own work," Maya protested. "Someone must have gotten access to my account." Mr. Henderson frowned at his screen. "Do you have any evidence that someone else had your login information? Have you shared your password with anyone?" Maya shook her head, feeling helpless. She knew that whoever had done this had been clever enough to cover their tracks. "Can you restore the original versions?" "I'm sorry, but the system doesn't keep backup copies of student work. The policy assumes that students are responsible for their own account security." Mr. Henderson looked genuinely sympathetic, but his hands were tied by school technology policies. Maya left the classroom feeling defeated. Her perfect GPA, which she had worked so hard to maintain, was now damaged by sabotage that she couldn't prove. The psychological impact was devastating, not just the academic consequences, but the realization that her tormentors had escalated to actively destroying her achievements. During lunch, Maya sought refuge in the far corner of the school library, hoping to find some peace in the familiar sanctuary of books and quiet study spaces. But even there, she couldn't escape the mounting pressure. She was reading alone at a table near the periodical section when she noticed 3 sophomore girls at a nearby table, whispering and occasionally glancing in her direction. One of them was holding up her phone, and Maya realized with horror that they were taking pictures of her. "Excuse me," Maya said quietly, approaching their table. "Could you please not photograph me?" The girls looked at her with expressions of exaggerated innocence. "We're not taking pictures of you," one of them said. "We're working on a project about library architecture." "I can see that your camera is pointed at me," Maya replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Wow, paranoid much?" another girl said. And all 3 of them giggled. Maya returned to her table, but the damage was done. She could no longer concentrate on her reading, constantly aware that she might be under surveillance. When she looked up a few minutes later, the 3 girls were gone. But she had no doubt that whatever photos they had taken would soon be circulating on social media. The week continued with a series of smaller incidents that individually might have seemed insignificant, but collectively created an atmosphere of constant stress and vigilance. Someone left a fake college rejection letter in her mailbox at home, complete with an official-looking letterhead from UC Berkeley. She received anonymous text messages at random hours, usually just single words like outsider or unwanted, that were designed to keep her on edge. Her car was keyed in the school parking lot, leaving deep scratches along the passenger side that would cost hundreds of dollars to repair. When she reported the vandalism to school security, they told her that without witnesses or camera footage, there was nothing they could do. Maya began to notice that other students were treating her differently. Conversations would stop when she entered a room. People would avoid making eye contact with her in hallways. Her lab partner in chemistry class requested a transfer to work with someone else, claiming that their working styles weren't compatible. The isolation was becoming total. Not only was she being actively harassed by Chloe, Madison, and Ashley, but their influence was spreading to other students, who either believed the rumors being spread about her or simply didn't want a risk becoming targets themselves. At home, Maya's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would spend hours checking and rechecking her homework, paranoid that someone might have tampered with it. She installed additional security apps on her phone and laptop, changed all her passwords, and became obsessive about protecting her personal information. Her parents knew something was seriously wrong, but Maya's responses to their questions became more defensive and evasive. She was terrified that if she told them the truth, they would either dismiss her concerns as typical teenage drama or worse, contact the school and make the situation even more unbearable. During her evening training sessions with her grandmother, Maya's frustration finally began to show. Her movements became aggressive rather than controlled, her breathing was labored, and her focus was scattered. One evening, while practicing forms in their garage, Maya's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. She was working through a complex sequence of kicks and blocks when she suddenly stopped mid-movement and sat down hard on the mat. "I can't do this anymore," she said, and for the first time in months, her voice carried real emotion instead of the carefully controlled neutrality she had maintained. Harmony stopped her own practice and sat beside her granddaughter. "Tell me, what's happening?" Maya found herself pouring out the entire story, the systematic harassment, the sabotage of her grades, the spreading rumors, the social isolation, and the feeling that she was trapped in a situation with no good options. "They're destroying everything I've worked for," Maya said, tears finally coming after months of suppressed emotion. "My grades, my reputation, my peace of mind. And I can't fight back because they're too smart to get caught, and because you taught me that violence isn't the answer." Harmony listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious as Maya's story unfolded. When Maya finished speaking, her grandmother was quiet for a long moment. "I taught you that violence should not be your first choice," Harmony said finally. "But I also taught you that a warrior protects herself and others from those who would cause harm. These girls are not just being mean. They are systematically trying to destroy your spirit and your future. But if I fight back, I'll be the one who gets in trouble," Maya protested. "They'll make it look like I'm the aggressor." "Sometimes," Harmony said slowly, "the choice is not between good consequences and bad consequences. Sometimes the choice is between being destroyed slowly or taking a stand and accepting whatever comes after." As graduation week approached, Maya felt the pressure building to an almost unbearable level. The three girls seemed to sense that their time was running out, and their attacks became more frequent and more personal. Someone had created a fake social media account using Maya's name and photo, posting embarrassing content that was designed to damage her reputation. Anonymous emails were sent to her college admissions counselor at UC Berkeley, suggesting that Maya had been involved in cheating scandals and disciplinary problems at Roosevelt High. Maya spent hours each day trying to control the damage, contacting websites to report fake accounts, calling Berkeley to clarify her record, and documenting incidents that she knew she could never prove. The stress was consuming her life and destroying her ability to focus on anything else. The final straw came 2 days before graduation, during the mandatory cap and gown fitting in the school gymnasium. Maya had been dreading the event, knowing that it would require her to be in close proximity to her tormentors in a crowded, chaotic environment. As she stood in line waiting to receive her graduation regalia, Maya overheard Chloe talking loudly to Madison and Ashley about their plans for graduation day. "It's going to be so perfect," Chloe was saying, right there in front of everyone. Her parents, our parents, all the teachers. She never forget it. "Are you sure we won't get in trouble?" Ashley asked nervously. "Please," Madison scoffed. "By the time anyone figures out what happened, it'll be too late to do anything about it. And who's going to believe her anyway? She's been acting paranoid and unstable for weeks." Maya felt her blood turn to ice as she realized they were planning something for the graduation ceremony itself. Whatever they had in mind was going to be public, humiliating, and timed to cause maximum damage with minimum consequences for themselves. As Maya walked home that afternoon, her cap and gown bag clutched in her trembling hands, she realized that her months of restraint and patience had been leading to this moment. Tomorrow would either be the end of her ordeal or the culmination of everything her tormentors had been building toward. The quiet, disciplined girl who had absorbed months of systematic abuse was about to face the ultimate test of her principles. Her training, and her ability to protect herself when no one else would. Graduation morning arrived with the kind of perfect California weather that photographers dream about: clear blue skies, gentle breeze, and golden sunshine that made Roosevelt High School's campus look like something from a college brochure. For most of the 480 graduating seniors, it was the culmination of 13 years of education and the beginning of their adult lives. For Maya Chun, it felt like walking into an ambush. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing through possible scenarios of what Chloe, Madison, and Ashley might have planned. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard their voices from the gymnasium, right there in front of everyone. She'd never forget it. Maya's parents were bustling around the house with nervous excitement, her mother adjusting and readjusting Maya's cap and gown while her father checked and rechecked the camera battery. They had invited Maya's grandmother to attend, and Homoni sat quietly in the living room, watching her granddaughter with knowing eyes. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Linda Chun said, stepping back to admire Maya and her graduation regalia. The navy blue gown hung perfectly on Maya's small frame, and the cap sat at just the right angle on her long black hair. "I'm so proud of," David Chun added, pulling out his phone to take what felt like the 100th photo of the morning. "Our daughter, graduating from high school and heading to Berkeley. Who would have thought when we moved here that everything would work out so perfectly?" Maya forced a smile for the camera, but inside she felt like she was wearing armor instead of graduation attire. Beneath her gown, she had chosen a simple white sundress with a modest neckline and knee-length hem, something that would be appropriate for family photos and the reception afterward. As they prepared to leave for the ceremony, Homoni approached Maya privately. "Remember what we discussed," she said quietly, adjusting Maya's cap with gentle hands. "Sometimes the greatest courage is knowing when to stop being patient." The graduation ceremony was scheduled to begin at 10 o'clock on the football field, with families filling the bleachers and students gathering in the gymnasium beforehand for final instructions and lineup formation. Maya's stomach churned as their car pulled into the school parking lot, which was packed with vehicles and filled with the excited chatter of families arriving for the celebration. Maya kissed her parents goodbye and made her way toward the gymnasium, her graduation gown swishing around her legs as she walked. She could see other students streaming toward the building, some laughing and taking selfies, others looking nervous about the formal ceremony ahead. Inside the gymnasium, the graduating class was organized into alphabetical order for the processional. Maya found her place in the C-section, between Marcus Caldwell and Rebecca Coleman, both of whom she barely knew. The noise level was tremendous as 480 teenagers tried to follow instructions from harried faculty members while also saying goodbye to friends and taking final high school photos. Maya tried to stay focused on the instructions being given over the loudspeaker, but she couldn't help scanning the crowd for Chloe, Madison, and Ashley. She spotted them in the W and B sections respectively, all three looking radiant and excited, surrounded by friends who were eager to capture every moment of their graduation day. As Maya watched them, she noticed something that made her breath catch. All three girls kept glancing in her direction, and when they thought she wasn't looking, they would whisper to each other and smile in a way that made Maya's skin crawl. Whatever they had planned, they were excited about it. The ceremony began with the traditional processional, seniors filing out of the gymnasium and onto the football field to the strains of pomp and circumstance. Maya walked in her designated place, trying to focus on putting one foot in front of the other, while hundreds of family members applauded from the bleachers. The field had been set up with rows of white folding chairs for the graduates, facing a stage where school administrators and faculty members sat in their academic regalia. Behind them, a large banner proclaimed Roosevelt High School Class of 2024, ready to soar. Maya took her assigned seat and tried to calm her racing heart. The ceremony would last approximately 90 minutes, with speeches from the valedictorian and salutatorian, remarks from the principal and superintendent, and then the individual presentation of diplomas. She just had to get through 90 minutes, and then her time at Roosevelt High would be over forever. The speeches began, but Maya found it impossible to concentrate on the words. She was hyper-aware of her surroundings, noting the location of exits, the positions of faculty members, and the behavior of students around her. Several times she caught Chloe, Madison, or Ashley looking in her direction, and each time they would quickly look away and whisper to their neighbors. As the ceremony progressed, Maya began to relax slightly. Maybe she had misunderstood their conversation in the gymnasium. Maybe their plan, whatever it was, had fallen through. Maybe she would actually make it through graduation without incident. Then came the moment she had been dreading, the presentation of diplomas. Students were called in alphabetical order to walk across the stage, shake hands with the principal, and receive their diplomas. Maya watched as the A and B students completed their walks, each one greeted with cheers from family and friends in the bleachers. When they reached the C section, Maya's heart began pounding again. She was third in line behind Marcus Caldwell and Rebecca Coleman. As Marcus walked across the stage to scattered applause, Maya stood up and moved into position. "Rebecca Coleman," the principal announced, and Rebecca walked across the stage with confident steps, her family cheering loudly from the stands. Maya was next. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her as she stood at the edge of the stage, waiting for her name to be called. In the bleachers, she could see her parents and grandmother, all three holding cameras and beaming with pride. "Maya Chun," the principal announced, and Maya began walking across the stage. Everything seemed to be going normally. She approached the principal, extended her hand for the traditional handshake, and reached for her diploma with her left hand. The crowd applauded politely, and she could hear her father shouting, "That's my daughter," from somewhere in the bleachers. But as Maya turned to walk back to her seat, diploma in hand, something went terribly wrong. She felt a sharp tug on the back of her graduation gown, followed by the unmistakable sound of fabric tearing. At first, she thought she had caught her gown on something, but then she felt hands grabbing at the fabric and pulling deliberately. Maya spun around to see Ashley Martinez standing directly behind her, having apparently left her seat in the B section and moved onto the stage. Ashley's hands were twisted in the fabric of Maya's gown, and she was pulling hard enough to tear the cheap polyester material. "Oops," Ashley said loudly, her voice carrying across the silent football field. "Looks like someone's gown is a little too big for her." Before Maya could react, Madison Brooks appeared on her other side, having also somehow made it onto the stage without being stopped by security. Madison grabbed the shoulders of Maya's gown and pulled in the opposite direction, causing a long tear down the back seam. "We're just trying to help," Madison called out, her voice pitched to sound helpful and concerned. "We don't want Maya to trip on all this extra fabric." The crowd in the bleachers had gone completely silent, unsure of what they were witnessing. Faculty members on the stage looked confused and uncertain about how to respond to what appeared to be an impromptu wardrobe adjustment by helpful classmates, but Maya knew this was no accident or helpful gesture. This was the culmination of months of systematic harassment, timed perfectly to cause maximum humiliation in front of the largest possible audience. Then Chloe Whitman appeared, completing the triangle around Maya. Unlike the other two, Chloe made no pretense of being helpful. She grabbed the front of Maya's gown and pulled hard, causing buttons to pop and fabric to tear. "Some people just don't know how to dress for special occasions," Chloe announced, her voice carrying clearly across the football field. "Maybe we should help her out of this ugly thing altogether." As Maya felt her graduation gown being systematically destroyed around her, she could hear gasps and murmurs from the crowd. Camera phones were being raised throughout the bleachers as parents and family members tried to capture what they thought was some kind of graduation tradition or prank. But this was no prank. As her gown fell away in tatters, Maya realized with horror that the three girls weren't stopping there. Ashley's hands were now reaching for the straps of Maya's white sundress, and Madison was grabbing at the hem, trying to pull it upward. "Let's see what she's really wearing under here," Ashley said with a cruel laugh that was amplified by the stadium's acoustics. Maya felt the fabric of her dress beginning to tear as 3 sets of hands pulled at it from different directions. She could hear her mother screaming from the bleachers, could see faculty members finally beginning to move toward them, could feel the eyes of hundreds of people watching her humiliation unfold in real time. And in that moment, standing on the stage at Roosevelt High School with her clothes being torn from her body while an audience of strangers watched and recorded, Maya Chun finally reached the breaking point that had been building for months. The transformation was instantaneous and complete. Every lesson her grandmother had taught her, every hour of training, every principle of martial arts philosophy, suddenly crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. Maya's posture changed first. Her spine straightened, her shoulders squared, and her weight shifted to the balls of her feet in a stance that her grandmother would have recognized immediately. Her breathing became deep and controlled, and when she looked up at her 3 attackers, her eyes held something that made all of them pause. "Let go of me," Maya said, and her voice carried a quiet authority that cut through the confusion and noise of the crowd like a blade. The 3 girls, caught off guard by the sudden change in their victim's demeanor, hesitated for just a moment. Ashley loosened her grip on Maya's dress. Madison took a half-step backward, and Chloe's confident smirk faltered slightly. That moment of hesitation was all Maya needed. 20 years of martial arts training surged to the surface as Maya's right hand shot out in a lightning-fast strike that caught Ashley in the solar plexus. Ashley doubled over and stumbled backward, gasping for air and releasing her hold on Maya's dress completely. Before Madison could react, Maya pivoted smoothly and delivered a precise elbow strike to Madison's ribs, causing her to cry out and stagger sideways into the row of faculty chairs behind the podium. Chloe, seeing her friend suddenly incapacitated, tried to grab Maya from behind, but Maya stepped to the side with fluid grace and used Chloe's own momentum to send her sprawling across the stage in front of hundreds of shocked spectators. The entire sequence took less than 5 seconds, but its impact was electric. The football field fell into complete silence as 480 graduating seniors, their families, faculty members, and community leaders processed what they had just witnessed. The quiet, invisible girl who had endured months of systematic harassment had just taken down 3 of the school's most popular students with movements so quick and precise they seemed almost choreographed. Maya stood in the center of the stage, her torn dress hanging around her, but her posture radiating confidence and control. In her hand, she still clutched her diploma, the symbol of her academic achievement that no one could take away from her. When she spoke, her voice was calm and steady, carrying easily to every corner of the silent stadium. "My name is Maya Chun," she said, addressing the crowd directly for the first time in her months at Roosevelt High School, "and I am not your victim." The silence that followed Maya's declaration lasted for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 seconds. 480 graduating seniors sat motionless in their white plastic chairs, their families frozen in the bleachers with cameras still raised, faculty members suspended mid-step as they tried to process what had just unfolded on their graduation stage. Then Principal Harrison's voice crackled through the sound system, breaking the spell. "Security to the stage, please. Medical assistance to the stage." The announcement seemed to release everyone from their paralysis. Conversations erupted throughout the bleachers as parents tried to explain to confused younger siblings what they had witnessed. Students in the audience turned to each other with expressions of shock, excitement, and in some cases, admiration. Camera phones that had been recording the diploma presentation continued to roll, capturing every moment of the aftermath. Maya remained standing in the center of the stage, her torn white dress barely covering her, but her posture still radiating the controlled power that had emerged moments before. Around her, the three girls who had tormented her for months were in various states of distress. Ashley Martinez was still doubled over, clutching her stomach and making small whimpering sounds. As she struggled to catch her breath, the precise strike to her solar plexus had temporarily paralyzed her diaphragm, and panic was setting in as she realized she couldn't draw a full breath. Madison Brooks was sitting on the ground beside the overturned faculty chairs, holding her ribs and looking at Maya with an expression of pure disbelief. The girl who had spent months dismissing Maya as weak and insignificant was now forced to acknowledge that she had been completely outched. Chloe Whitman was the most visibly shaken of the three. She had landed hard when Maya redirected her momentum, and she was now lying on her side at the edge of the stage, her perfectly styled blonde hair disheveled and her graduation cap lying several feet away. More than the physical impact, though, she seemed devastated by the complete reversal of power dynamics. School security officers reached the stage first, followed closely by the school nurse and two paramedics who had been stationed at the ceremony as a precaution. As they began assessing the three girls, Maya felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Mrs. Rodriguez, the librarian who had always been kind to her, holding a Roosevelt High School sweatshirt. "Here, honey," Mrs. Rodriguez said softly, helping Maya slip the sweatshirt over her torn dress. "Let's get you covered up." "Thank you," Maya said, her voice still steady despite everything that had just happened. Dr. Patricia Vance, the school superintendent, approached them with a mixture of concern and confusion on her face. "Maya, are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" Maya looked at the woman who represented the highest level of authority in the school district, the person who could have intervened months ago if anyone had bothered to investigate the systematic harassment she had endured. "I'm fine, Dr. Vance. I was defending myself." "Defending yourself from what, exactly?" Dr. Vance asked, though her tone suggested she was beginning to understand that this incident was more complex than it had initially appeared. Before Maya could respond, a voice called out from the bleachers. They were attacking her. Maya looked toward the crowd and saw a girl named Jennifer Walsh standing up in the student section. Jennifer was a quiet sophomore whom Maya barely knew, but she was pointing toward the stage with obvious indignation. "Those three girls were tearing her clothes off," Jennifer continued, her voice carrying clearly across the field. "She was just defending herself." Other voices began joining in from throughout the bleachers. Students who had remained silent during months of witnessing Maya's harassment were finally finding their courage. "They've been bullying her all year," called out Marcus Rivera, a senior from Maya's calculus class. "I saw them following her around school and taking pictures," added a girl Maya didn't recognize. "They sabotaged her group project in English class," shouted David Kim, whose locker was near Maya's single quotes S. Dr. Vance looked increasingly uncomfortable as more students spoke up, painting a picture of systematic harassment that had gone unaddressed by school administration. She raised her hand to quiet the crowd. "Let's handle this calmly. Everyone please return to your seats so we can continue with the ceremony." But Maya shook her head. "No," she said, stepping toward the microphone that Principal Harrison had abandoned. "They need to hear this." Dr. Vance moved to block her path. "Maya, I think it would be better if we discuss this privately after the ceremony." "You've had months to discuss this privately," Maya replied, her voice carrying the same quiet authority that had emerged during the confrontation. "Now it's time to discuss it publicly." She stepped around Dr. Vance and approached the microphone. The sound system amplified her voice as she addressed the entire gathering: students, families, faculty, and community members who had come to celebrate what should have been a joyous occasion. "My name is Maya Chen," she began, echoing her earlier declaration, but with more context. "4 months ago, my family moved to Riverside, and I started my senior year at Roosevelt High School. I hoped to finish my education quietly, make a few friends, and graduate without causing any trouble." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Instead, I became the target of a systematic campaign of harassment by 3 students who decided that I didn't belong here. They sabotaged my academic work, spread lies about my character, isolated me from other students, and destroyed my personal property. They turned my senior year into a nightmare. Maya paused, looking out at the sea of faces before continuing. "I never fought back because I was taught that violence should be a last resort. I was taught that patience and kindness could overcome cruelty. I was taught that if I just ignored them, they would eventually get bored and leave me alone." Her voice grew stronger. "But today, they crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. They decided to humiliate me in front of my parents, your parents, and everyone who matters to our community. They tried to strip me of my dignity in front of hundreds of witnesses." Maya gestured toward the 3 girls who were now receiving medical attention but were clearly listening to every word. "They made a serious mistake. They assumed that quiet meant weak. They assumed that the patient meant powerless. They assumed that kind meant defenseless." The crowd stirred as Maya's words resonated with students who had their own experiences with bullying, parents who worried about their children's safety, and community members who were beginning to understand the complexity of what they had witnessed. "I want everyone here to understand something," Maya continued. "What you saw was not an attack, it was self-defense. What you saw was not aggression. It was someone finally refusing to be a victim." She looked directly at her parents in the bleachers, seeing her mother's tears and her father's expression of fierce pride. "I also want you to understand that this could have been prevented. Teachers knew these students were targeting me. Administrators received reports about their behavior. But nothing was done because their harassment was subtle. Their families have influence, and I was just the new girl who didn't matter." Dr. Vance stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of Maya's accusations. "Maya, these are serious allegations that require proper investigation. The investigation is over." Maya interrupted, her voice cutting through Dr. Vance's attempt to regain control of the situation. "You just witnessed the conclusion in front of 500 witnesses." She turned back to the microphone. "I'm not here to embarrass Roosevelt High School or ruin anyone's graduation. I'm here to graduate with dignity and move on with my life. But I also want every student here to know that you don't have to accept being treated cruelly. You don't have to suffer in silence. And you don't have to let bullies destroy your education or your self-worth." Maya looked out at the student section, making eye contact with faces she recognized, some who had watched her harassment without intervening, others who had been targets themselves, and a few who had shown her small kindnesses during her difficult months at Roosevelt. If someone is making your life miserable, tell someone who will listen. If they don't listen, tell someone else. And if no one listens, protect yourself. You have the right to feel safe at school. You have the right to pursue your education without fear. And you have the right to defend yourself when those rights are threatened. As Maya stepped back from the microphone, something unexpected happened. Jennifer Walsh, the sophomore who had first spoken up from the bleachers, started clapping. Her applause was quickly joined by other students, then by parents, and finally by faculty members who were beginning to understand the courage it had taken for Maya to endure months of harassment in silence. The applause built to a standing ovation. As hundreds of people rose to their feet, showing their support for the quiet girl who had finally found her voice. Maya felt tears stinging her eyes as she looked out at the crowd, seeing approval and admiration where she had expected judgment and condemnation. But the most meaningful moment came when she saw her grandmother standing in the bleachers, her hands pressed together in a gesture of respect that Maya recognized from their training sessions. Halmoni's expression showed not just pride, but a deep satisfaction that her granddaughter had finally learned the most important lesson of martial arts, knowing when to stop being patient. As the applause continued, Maya noticed that the three girls who had tormented her were being helped off the stage by paramedics and school officials. Ashley was breathing normally again, but looked shaken and embarrassed. Madison was walking under her own power, but kept glancing back at Maya with something that might have been newfound respect. Chloe was the last to leave the stage, and as she passed Maya, she stopped and spoke quietly. "I didn't know," Chloe said, her voice barely audible over the ongoing applause. "I didn't know you could. I didn't know who you really were." Maya looked at the girl who had orchestrated months of psychological torture, who had planned today's humiliation as the grand finale of her cruelty. "You never bothered to find out," Maya replied simply. Principal Harrison returned to the microphone as the applause finally died down. "I think we can all agree that this has been an unusual graduation ceremony," he said, attempting to inject some levity into the situation. "But Maya Chun has reminded us of some important truths about courage, dignity, and standing up for ourselves and others." He paused, looking out at the crowd. "Maya, would you like to receive your diploma properly?" Maya nodded and walked back toward Principal Harrison. This time, her approach across the stage was met with enthusiastic cheers from the crowd. When she shook his hand and accepted her diploma, the noise from the bleachers was deafening. As she walked back to her seat, Maya felt a fundamental shift in how she was perceived by her classmates and community. She was no longer the invisible new girl who could be safely ignored or casually tormented. She was someone who commanded respect, someone who had proven that even the quietest person could have hidden depths of strength and courage. The remainder of the graduation ceremony proceeded without incident, but there was an electric energy in the air that hadn't been there before. Students seemed more aware of each other, more conscious of the impact their actions might have on their classmates. The easy social hierarchies that had seemed so permanent suddenly felt more fragile and questionable. When the ceremony finally concluded and graduates were dismissed to celebrate with their families, Maya was surrounded by classmates who had never spoken to her before. Some wanted to congratulate her on her courage, others wanted to apologize for not intervening during the months of harassment, and a few wanted to learn more about martial arts. But Maya's attention was focused on reaching her family, who were waiting for her at the edge of the field with expressions of love, pride, and deep relief that their daughter's ordeal was finally over. The graduation reception in Roosevelt High School's cafeteria felt like an entirely different event than what had been planned. What should have been a casual celebration with punch, cookies, and proud family photos had transformed into something more complex: part support rally, part community awakening, and part reckoning with uncomfortable truths about the schools culture. Maya stood near the dessert table, still wearing Mrs. Rodriguez's sweatshirt over her torn dress, surrounded by a constantly changing group of students, parents, and faculty members. Some came to offer congratulations, others to share their own experiences with bullying, and many simply to get a closer look at the girl who had become the talk of Riverside County in less than 2 hours. Her parents, Linda and David Chun, flanked her on either side, their expressions a mixture of fierce protectiveness and bewildered pride. They had come to Roosevelt High that morning, expecting to watch their daughter walk across the stage and collect a piece of paper. Instead, they had witnessed her transform from victim to victor in front of hundreds of witnesses. "Maya, honey," her mother said quietly during a brief lull in the stream of well-wishers, "are you sure you're all right? We can leave whenever you want." Maya looked around the bustling cafeteria, taking in the animated conversations happening. At every table, the clusters of students showing each other cell phone videos of the incident, and the small groups of parents engaged in serious discussions about bullying policies and school accountability. "I'm fine, Mom," Maya replied, and for the first time in months, she truly meant it. "Actually, I think I need to stay for a while. People want to talk, and I think it's important that they do." David Chun squeezed his daughter's shoulder. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for defending yourself, but for how you're handling all of this. You're showing incredible maturity." As if summoned by their conversation, Maya's grandmother appeared at her elbow, moving through the crowd with the quiet confidence that had always characterized her. Harmony's presence seemed to create a small bubble of calm in the chaos surrounding them. "Walk with me," Harmony said simply, and Maya followed her toward a quieter corner of the cafeteria. "Your speech was good," Harmony said as they found a relatively private spot near the windows overlooking the courtyard. "But the real test comes now." "What do you mean?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Today you showed everyone who you really are," Harmony explained. "Now you have to decide what you're going to do with that power. People will expect things from you now. They'll want you to be their champion, their example, their inspiration. That can be a heavy burden." Maya nodded, already feeling the weight of expectations from the conversation she'd had in the past hour. "What if I just want to go to college and live a normal life?" "There's nothing normal about what happened today," Harmony said with a slight smile. "You can't put that genie back in the bottle, but you can choose how to use the influence you've gained." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Dr. Vance, the superintendent, who had been noticeably absent from the reception until now. She looked tired and stressed, clearly having spent the past hour dealing with the fallout from the incident. "Maya," Dr. Vance said, extending her hand in what seemed like a peace offering, "I wanted to apologize personally for what you've endured at our school. I've been reviewing incident reports and speaking with faculty, and it's clear that we failed." Maya studied the woman's face, trying to gauge the sincerity of her words. "What are you going to do about it?" "We're implementing immediate changes to our anti-bullying policies," Dr. Vance replied. "More training for faculty on recognizing subtle forms of harassment, clearer reporting procedures for students, and accountability measures for administrators who don't take action when problems are brought to their attention." "That's good," Maya said carefully. "But what about the students who are being bullied right now? The ones who don't have black belts to protect themselves?" Dr. Vance looked uncomfortable but determined. "We're creating a peer mediation program, expanding our counseling services, and establishing an anonymous reporting system. We're also going to be much more proactive about investigating complaints instead of waiting for situations to escalate." Harmony spoke up for the first time. "And the 3 girls who attacked my granddaughter? They're being suspended pending a full investigation," Dr. Vance replied. "Depending on the findings, they may face additional consequences. What happened today was assault, regardless of their previous academic standing or family connections." As Dr. Vance walked away to deal with other crisis management issues, Maya found herself approached by Jennifer Walsh, the sophomore who had been the first to speak up during the ceremony. "Maya, I wanted to thank you," Jennifer said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been dealing with some girls in my grade who ... Well, it's not as bad as what you went through, but they've been making my life pretty miserable." Maya felt a stab of recognition and sympathy. "Have you talked to anyone about it?" Jennifer shook her head. "I was scared it would make things worse. But after seeing what you did today and hearing your speech, I think I'm ready to speak up." "Good," Maya said firmly. "And if the first person you talk to doesn't listen, find someone who will. Don't suffer in silence like I did." Over the next hour, similar conversations repeated themselves throughout the cafeteria. Maya found herself becoming an impromptu counselor, listening to stories from students who had been targets of harassment, offering advice to parents who were concerned about their children's social experiences, and even speaking with teachers who admitted they hadn't recognized the signs of systematic bullying. One conversation stood out in particular. Rebecca Martinez, a junior Maya barely knew, approached her with tears in her eyes. "I'm Ashley's cousin," Rebecca said, her voice shaking. "I wanted to apologize for what she did to you. Our whole family is horrified." Maya studied the girl's face, seeing genuine distress and embarrassment. "You're not responsible for your cousin's choices." "But I knew," Rebecca continued. "I heard her and her friends talking about you at family gatherings. They would laugh about things they did at school, and I knew it was wrong, but I never said anything because I didn't want them to turn on me." "That's understandable," Maya said gently. "It takes courage to speak up, especially against people you're close to." "I should have been braver," Rebecca said. "Maybe if I had said something months ago, today never would have happened." Maya considered. "This, maybe, but you can't change the past. The question is what you're going to do differently in the future." As the afternoon wore on, Maya began to notice changes in the social dynamics around her that went beyond individual conversations. Groups of students who had never interacted before were talking animatedly about bullying, school culture, and the courage to stand up for others. Parents were exchanging contact information and discussing ways to create better support systems for their children. Even faculty members seemed to be having more honest conversations about the challenges they faced in maintaining safe, inclusive learning environments. The most surprising development came when Marcus Caldwell, the student who had walked across the graduation stage right before Maya, approached her with an unusual request. "Maya, I know this might sound weird, but a bunch of us are talking about starting some kind of anti-bullying club or organization next year," he said. "We were wondering if you'd be willing to help us get it started." Maya was taken aback. "I'm going to Berkeley in the fall. I won't be here next year." "We know," Marcus replied. "But we were hoping you might help us design the program and maybe come back to speak to students occasionally. What happened today showed a lot of us that we've been bystanders for too long. We want to create a culture where people like you don't have to suffer in silence." The request represented everything Maya had hoped to avoid: ongoing involvement, public attention, the pressure to be a spokesperson for causes she had never sought to champion. But looking around the cafeteria at the animated discussions and genuine soul-searching happening because of her actions, she realized that walking away entirely might be selfish. "Let me think about it," she told Marcus. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I need some time to process everything that's happened." As the reception began winding down, Maya's family prepared to leave. They had taken dozens of photos, fielded countless questions from friends and relatives who had attended the ceremony, and navigated the complex emotions of a day that had been both triumphant and traumatic. But before they could make their exit, they were approached by an unexpected visitor. Principal Harrison walked over with 3 other people Maya didn't recognize: a woman with a professional camera, a man with a tablet and serious expression, and a younger woman with a recording device. "Maya, these folks are from the Riverside County Register," Principal Harrison explained. "They'd like to interview you about what happened today, if you're willing." The reporter with the tablet stepped forward. "I'm Michael Torres from the Register. What happened today is already spreading on social media, and we think your story could help other students who are dealing with similar situations." Maya looked at her parents, then at her grandmother, seeking guidance. This was exactly the kind of attention she had always tried to avoid, but she was beginning to understand that her story might be bigger than her personal preferences. "What would you want to know?" she asked carefully. "We'd like to tell the full story," the reporter replied. "Not just what happened today, but what led up to it. We want people to understand how systematic harassment can escalate and what can be done to prevent it." Maya thought about Jennifer Walsh, about Rebecca Martinez, about all the students she had spoken with that afternoon who were dealing with their own versions of the nightmare she had endured. She thought about the changes Dr. Vance had promised and whether media attention might help ensure those changes actually happened. "Okay," she said finally. "But I want to make sure the focus is on solutions, not just drama. I want this to help other students, not just entertain people." The interview took place in Principal Harrison's office, with Maya's parents present and her grandmother offering occasional guidance. Maya found herself telling the complete story of her months at Roosevelt High for the first time. From her family's move to Riverside, through the systematic harassment campaign, to the morning's confrontation. As she spoke, Maya realized that articulating her experience was helping her process it in a way she hadn't expected. The months of confusion and self-doubt began to clarify into a coherent narrative of injustice, resilience, and ultimately triumph. "What do you want other students to take away from your story?" the reporter asked as the interview concluded. Maya thought carefully before responding. "I want them to know that they don't have to accept being treated cruelly. I want them to understand that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And I want them to know that sometimes, when all else fails, it's okay to defend yourself." She paused, thinking about her grandmother's lessons and the transformation she had undergone. "But most importantly, I want them to know that they're not alone. There are people who will listen, people who will help, and people who will stand up for them when they're ready to stand up for themselves." As her family finally left Roosevelt High School that afternoon, Maya felt a complex mixture of relief, pride, and uncertainty about the future. The quiet, invisible girl who had walked onto campus that morning was gone forever, replaced by someone who had found her voice and her power in the most public way possible. The ripple effects of what had happened were just beginning, and Maya was starting to understand that her story might touch lives far beyond the boundaries of Roosevelt High School or even Riverside County. Whether she was ready for it or not, she had become a symbol of courage for anyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of cruelty. The question now was what she would choose to do with that responsibility. 3 months after graduation, Maya Chun stood in her dorm room at UC Berkeley, unpacking the last box of belongings from home. The afternoon sun streamed through her window, illuminating acceptance letters, scholarship certificates, and a framed newspaper clipping that her mother had insisted she bring to college. The headline read, "Students' Graduation Day Stand Against Bullies Sparks Statewide Policy Changes." Below, it was a photo of Maya at the podium during the ceremony, her torn dress covered by Mrs. Rodriguez's sweatshirt, addressing the crowd that had fallen completely silent to hear her words. Maya's roommate, Jessica Park, a freshman from San Francisco, picked up the clipping with curiosity. "Is this really you? My mom sent me this article when it came out. She said it was the most inspiring thing she'd read all year." Maya nodded, still feeling slightly surreal about the attention her story had received. "It doesn't feel like me anymore. Sometimes I look at that photo and it's like watching someone else's life." "What was it like afterward?" Jessica asked, settling onto her bed with genuine interest. "I mean, after you became famous?" Maya laughed softly. "I wasn't famous. I was just a girl who had a really bad day and finally did something about it." But even as she said it, Maya knew that wasn't entirely true. The story had spread far beyond Riverside County. The video of the graduation incident, recorded by dozens of phones, had gone viral within hours. Maya's speech about standing up to bullies had been shared millions of times across social media platforms. More importantly, her story had sparked conversations in schools across California and beyond. The Riverside County Register interview had been picked up by national news outlets, leading to appearances on talk shows, invitations to speak at educational conferences, and meetings with state legislators who were crafting new anti-bullying Legislation. Maya pulled out another item from her box, a thick folder filled with letters from students around the country who had reached out to share their own experiences with bullying. Some thanked her for giving them courage to speak up. Others described how her story had prompted their schools to take action against harassment they had been enduring. One letter, from a boy named Daniel in Ohio, had particularly moved her. "I was ready to drop out of school because these kids were making my life hell every day. Then I saw your video and realized that being quiet wasn't protecting me, it was just making them stronger. I told my parents everything, and now those kids are the ones who have to worry about consequences instead of me." "These letters are incredible," Jessica said, reading over Maya's shoulder. "You really changed people's lives." Maya set the folder on her desk, next to her laptop and textbooks for her engineering courses. "They changed their own lives. I just showed them it was possible." A knock on their door interrupted the conversation. Maya opened it to find her Ara Mark Chun, no relation, despite the shared surname, holding an official-looking envelope. "This came for you through the main office," Mark said. "Looks important." Maya recognized the return address immediately. It was from Roosevelt High School. Inside, she found a formal invitation written on elegant cardstock. "The Roosevelt High School Board of Education cordially invites you to the dedication of the Maya Chun Student Advocacy Center, to be held on Saturday, October 15th at 2 p.m. Maya stared at the invitation in disbelief. "They're naming something after me?" She quickly scanned the accompanying letter from Dr. Vance, which explained that the school district had established a comprehensive anti-bullying resource center in honor of Maya's courage and the changes her actions had inspired. The center would provide counseling services, peer mediation programs, and educational resources for students, families, and faculty. The Maya Chun Student Advocacy Center will serve as a lasting reminder that every student deserves to feel safe, respected, and valued in their educational environment, the letter concluded. "Your willingness to stand up for yourself and speak out about systematic harassment has fundamentally changed how our district approaches student welfare." Jessica read the invitation over Maya's shoulder. "They're naming a building after you? That's amazing." Maya felt a complex mixture of pride and responsibility. When she had defended herself on that graduation stage, she hadn't been thinking about legacy or lasting impact. She had simply reached her breaking point and refused to accept being victimized any longer. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her grandmother. "Saw the news about the center. Very proud. Remember what I taught you about power, it's not what you take, it's what you give." That evening, Maya called her parents to discuss the invitation. Her mother answered the phone with obvious excitement. "Did you see the invitation? We're so proud of you, sweetheart. Who would have thought that horrible day would lead to something so positive?" "I don't know if I should go," Maya admitted. "Part of me just wants to move forward and not look back." Her father's voice joined the conversation as he picked up the extension. "Maya, I understand wanting to focus on your future. But think about all the students who are going through what you went through. If seeing you there gives even one kid the courage to ask for help, isn't that worth a few hours of your time?" Maya knew he was right, but she also worried about being typecast as the bullying girl for the rest of her life. She had worked hard to establish herself as a serious engineering student at Berkeley, joining study groups, participating in research opportunities, and building friendships based on shared academic interests rather than her past notoriety. The next morning, Maya made a decision that surprised even herself. She called Dr. Vance's office and accepted the invitation, but with one condition. She wanted to meet privately with current students who were dealing with bullying situations. "That can definitely be arranged," Dr. Vance assured her. "We actually have several students who have been asking specifically about speaking with you. Your story has given them hope that there are solutions to their problems." 2 weeks later, Maya found herself back in Riverside, driving through the familiar streets of her old neighborhood. Roosevelt High School looked exactly the same from the outside, but she knew that significant changes had taken place within its walls. The first part of her visit was the private meeting with students. Dr. Vance had arranged for her to speak with 8 teenagers who were currently experiencing various forms of harassment or social difficulties. They gathered in what had been an unused conference room, but was now the temporary headquarters for the student advocacy program. The students ranged from freshmen to seniors, representing different ethnicities, social backgrounds, and types of challenges. Some were dealing with traditional physical bullying, others with cyberbullying or social exclusion. What they all shared was a sense of isolation and uncertainty about how to improve their situations. Maya began by sharing not just the dramatic confrontation from graduation day, but the months of struggle that had led up to it. She talked about the gradual erosion of her confidence, the way systematic harassment had affected her academic performance and mental health, and her reluctance to seek help because she feared making things worse. "I want you to understand that I didn't wake up one morning and decide to become a martial arts hero," Maya explained. "I spent months being miserable, questioning myself, and hoping things would just get better on their own. The only thing I did right was finally reaching a point where I refused to accept being treated that way anymore." A sophomore named Alex raised his hand tentatively. "But what if you don't know martial arts? What if you can't defend yourself physically?" Maya nodded. "Physical self-defense was only possible for me because of very specific training I'd had since childhood. But the real defense, the one that anyone can learn, is refusing to suffer in silence. It's understanding that you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity." She looked around the room at the 8 faces watching her intently. "How many of you have told an adult about what you're experiencing?" Only 2 hands went up. "Why not?" Maya asked gently. The answers came in a flood. Fear of retaliation, worry that adults wouldn't take them seriously, concern about being labeled as weak or oversensitive, and uncertainty about whether their situations qualified as real bullying. Maya spent the next hour addressing each concern, sharing resources, and helping the students develop specific action plans for improving their situations. She emphasized that seeking help was a sign of strength, not weakness, and that they had the right to feel safe in their school environment. "Remember," she told them as the session concluded, "you don't have to wait until you reach a breaking point like I did. You can take action now while you still have control over how the situation unfolds." The public dedication ceremony that afternoon was both overwhelming and deeply moving. The renovated student center was beautiful, with comfortable seating areas, private consultation rooms, and walls lined with inspirational quotes about courage, resilience, and standing up for others. A plaque near the entrance read, "Dedicated to Maya Chun, class of 2024, whose courage in the face of adversity reminded us that every student deserves respect, dignity, and the opportunity to learn in safety." The ceremony was attended by current students, faculty, school board members, community leaders, and local media. Maya was surprised to see several faces from her graduating class, including Marcus Caldwell, who had followed through on his idea to start an anti-bullying organization. "Maya," Marcus called out as she arrived, "I wanted you to know that our peer advocacy group now has over 200 members. We've helped resolve dozens of conflict situations this semester." Even more surprising was the presence of Jennifer Walsh, the sophomore who had first spoken up during the graduation ceremony. She approached Maya with a confident smile that was dramatically different from the frightened girl Maya remembered. "I wanted to thank you again," Jennifer said. "After hearing your speech, I finally told my parents about what I was going through. It turned out those girls were harassing several other students too. The school investigated and found a whole pattern of behavior that nobody had connected before." "What happened to them?" Maya asked. They're in a restorative justice program. Now, Jennifer explained. They had to apologize to everyone they hurt, do community service, and participate in empathy training. One of them actually became a peer mediator because she realized how much damage she'd been causing. During the dedication ceremony, Maya was invited to speak to the gathered crowd, standing at the same type of podium where she had delivered her graduation speech. She felt the weight of how much had changed in just a few months. When I spoke at graduation, I was angry and hurt and desperate for people to understand what I had been going through, Maya began. Today I'm speaking from a place of hope and gratitude for what we can accomplish when we refuse to accept injustice. She gestured toward the beautifully appointed advocacy center around them. This space represents something more important than my individual story. It represents a commitment to creating environments where students can learn and grow without fear, where differences are celebrated rather than attacked, and where asking for help is seen as wisdom rather than weakness. Maya looked out at the audience, noticing several current students who had attended her private session earlier. But buildings and programs and policies are only as effective as the people who use them. Real change happens when individuals choose courage over comfort, when they decide to speak up rather than stay silent, and when they commit to being part of the solution rather than just complaining about the problem. As her speech concluded, Maya was approached by Dr. Vance with an unexpected proposal. Maya, the State Education Department has asked me to invite you to join a task force on student safety and anti-bullying initiatives. They're developing new policies that could affect schools throughout California, and they want input from someone who has lived experience with these issues. Maya felt the familiar tension between wanting to move forward with her own life and recognizing the opportunity to help others. How much time would it require? Probably 1 weekend per month during the school year, plus some remote participation in committee work, Dr. Vance explained. It's a significant commitment, but it could influence policy for millions of students. Looking around at the advocacy center that bore her name, thinking about the letters from students across the country, and remembering her grandmother's words about the responsibility that comes with power, Maya made her decision. I'll do it, she said. But I want to make sure the task force includes other students who are currently dealing with these issues, not just adults making decisions about teenage experiences they don't fully understand. As Maya drove back to Berkeley that evening, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that difficult spring day, when 3 girls had decided to humiliate her in front of hundreds of witnesses. Their attempt to destroy her dignity had instead revealed her strength and sparked a movement that was now affecting thousands of lives. Her phone rang as she merged onto the freeway. It was her grandmother. How did it go today? Halmoni asked. It was good, Maya replied. Overwhelming, but good. I think I'm finally understanding what you meant about using power responsibly. What's next for you? Maya smiled as she thought about her engineering coursework, her new friendships at Berkeley, the state task force opportunity, and the dozens of students who were now getting help because of changes inspired by her story. I'm going to be a student, she said, but also someone who remembers that strength isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about using your voice and your experiences to protect others. As she drove through the California evening, Maya Shen, former victim, current survivor, and future advocate, felt a deep sense of peace about the path that lay ahead. The quiet girl who had once tried to make herself invisible had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to disappear. Her story had begun with 3 bullies trying to strip away her dignity on graduation day. It had evolved into a legacy of courage that would inspire students for years to come. And it was far from over. Back at Roosevelt High School, the Maya Chun Student Advocacy Center would open its doors the next morning to students who needed someone to listen, someone to help, and someone to remind them that they were not alone. In classrooms across California, Teachers would implement new policies designed to prevent the kind of systematic harassment Maya had endured. Most importantly, in schools throughout the country, students who had seen Maya's story would find the courage to speak up, ask for help, and refuse to accept being treated with cruelty. The ripple effects of one moment of courage on a graduation stage would continue spreading, touching lives and changing policies, proving that sometimes the quietest people have the loudest impact when they finally decide to use their voice. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.